the upside-down wealth. Jesus' strategic move in the spirit realm. What if the most significant transaction in human history did not happen on the open market of the cross, but in the deep, silent audit of the grave? Most people understand the cost of Friday, the high price of blood, and the dividends of Sunday, the glory of the resurrection, but few have studied the hidden accounting of Saturday, the day Jesus descended to settle the cosmic debt once and for all. This was not a period of rest. It was a strategic liquidation of the assets of darkness. While the world saw a failed investment, heaven was executing a hostile takeover of the underworld between the thorns of the execution and the stone of the empty tomb. A cosmic battle unfolded where the very concept of value was redefined. Jesus did not just die to pay a fine. He descended to seize the keys of the entire system. He walked into the deepest vault of the enemy. Not as a prisoner, but as the new owner. The silence of that Saturday was not an absence of sound. It was the sound of a new authority being established. If you have ever felt like your life is stuck in a silent Saturday, where the debt feels too high and the return on investment seems zero, you need to hear this, because what happened in those 3 days is the ultimate blueprint for victory when all seems lost. The story of the descent is the story of how the greatest loss was converted into the ultimate gain. But before we uncover the secrets of this cosmic audit and the spirits held in the ancient prison, welcome to the upside-down life. To understand the appearance of this thought, we must first look at the architecture of the unseen world. In the philosophy of the ancient mind, the earth was not just soil and water, but a layered economy of souls. When Jesus breathed his last, he did not simply vanish into a vacuum of non-existence. He moved from the visible market of human history into the invisible ledger of the spirit realm. This movement is what we call the descent, a downward trajectory that contradicts every human instinct for upward mobility. In our modern financial world, we are taught to climb, to accumulate, and to ascend. But the philosophy of Christ is built on the paradox of the downward path. To gain everything, he first had to lose everything. To become the Lord of all, he had to become the servant of the deep. The place he entered was known to the Jews as Sheol, a vast holding ground. For the human spirit, think of it as a cosmic waiting room, a place where the righteous and the unrighteous were held in a state of suspended animation. In economic terms, Sheol was a place of frozen assets. The patriarchs, the prophets, and the faithful of old had invested their lives in the promises of God. They had died in faith, but they had not yet seen the payout. They were like shareholders in a company that had not yet gone public. They held the certificates of promise, but they could not access the actual wealth of heaven. On the other side of this realm was a place of torment, a division separated by a great chasm. This was the reality Jesus described when he spoke of the rich man and Lazarus, a world divided by the choices made in the light. When Jesus descended into this realm, he was not there to suffer more. The payment had already been made on the cross. The cry of "it is finished" was the final signature on the check of redemption. His entry into the realm of the dead was the beginning of the distribution phase. He went to paradise, also known as Abraham's bosom, to announce that the maturity date of their faith had arrived. Imagine the scene in that silent chamber. Abraham, who had waited 2,000 years for the seed of promise. David, who had sung of a king whose soul would not be left in the grave. Isaiah, who had spoken of a suffering servant who would see the light of life. Suddenly, the light himself walks into the darkness. This was the first phase of the cosmic acquisition. Jesus was not there to negotiate with death. He was there to declare that death was now under new management. He brought the thief from the cross with him, a man who had no merit, no works, and no spiritual capital. The thief was the first beneficiary of a grace that operates outside the laws of human meritocracy. He entered paradise not because he had earned a seat at the table, but because the owner of the table invited him. This reveals a profound financial philosophy of the kingdom. The value of a soul is not determined by its accumulated works, but by its connection to the source of life. The thief had a zero balance in his moral account, yet he was granted full access to the riches of paradise. But the descent went deeper than the comfort of the righteous. There was another realm, a darker prison that held the most ancient rebels of the cosmos. This is where the philosophy of justice meets the reality of spiritual warfare. Peter tells us that Jesus went and preached to the spirits in prison. These were not human souls, but the cosmic rebels from the days of Noah. In the divine economy, these beings had committed the ultimate fraud. They had attempted to corrupt the human seed and derail the plan of redemption. They were the original bad actors in the market of creation. God had responded by locking them in Tartarus, the maximum security wing of the Underworld. They were bound in chains of gloomy darkness, awaiting the final judgment. When Jesus descended to them, he did not offer them a second chance. There was no gospel of salvation for the fallen angels. The word used for his preaching was caruso, which means to herald or to announce. He was announcing his victory. He was showing them that their ancient conspiracy had failed. In the language of finance, this was the final foreclosure on the powers of darkness. They had thought that by killing the heir, they could seize the inheritance, but by dying, the heir had fulfilled the law and broken their legal hold on humanity. The descent was a legal walk through the halls of the enemy. Jesus was auditing the books of the prince of this world and finding him bankrupt. Every claim that Satan had over the human race was based on the debt of sin. For the legal reality of the cross to ripple through every dimension of existence, it shows us that God often works in the quiet before the breakthrough. We live in a world that values noise, speed, and immediate results. We want the resurrection on Friday afternoon, but God values the process of the descent. He values the time it takes to go to the root of the problem. Jesus did not just want to fix the symptoms of death. He wanted to dismantle the system of death. This required him to enter the very heart of the earth. As a philosopher of 50 years, I have seen many people try to skip the Saturday of their lives. They want the profit without the investment. They want the glory without the burial. But the law of the grain of wheat remains absolute. Unless it falls into the earth and dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. The descent of Jesus is the ultimate proof that nothing is ever lost in the hands of God. Every moment of silence, every season of waiting is an opportunity for a deeper work. While the disciples were hiding in fear, thinking their investment in Jesus had gone to zero, the greatest wealth of the universe was being unlocked. The resurrection was not just a miracle, it was the inevitable result of a successful mission. Once the debt was paid and the keys were seized, the grave could no longer hold the Prince of Life. It was a legal impossibility for death to keep its grip on the one who had no sin. The stone had to move, because the authority had already shifted. As we look at the world today, we see much darkness and many systems that seem to hold humanity captive. We see economic chains and spiritual prisons. But the philosophy of the descent tells us that there is no place too deep for the reach of Christ. He has already been to the bottom. He has already mapped the darkness, and he has already come back with the keys. This means that for the believer, there is no such thing as a dead end. There is only a passage to a greater glory. The descent was the preparation for the greatest ascent in history. When he rose, he did not just come back to life. He led a procession of captives into freedom. He took the frozen assets of the Old Testament and brought them into the liquid reality of the New Covenant. He turned the waiting room of Sheol into a victory parade. This is the hidden soul of the gospel. It is the assurance that the silence of God is never the absence of God. It is the guarantee that the battle is being won in the places we cannot see as we move forward. We must learn to trust the work that happens in the dark. We must learn to value the Saturday of our souls. because the one who descended is the same one who ascended far above all heavens. He fills all things, from the highest throne to the deepest pit. And if he fills all things, then there is no part of your life that is outside his jurisdiction. No debt is too large, no prison is too strong, and no silence is too loud. For the King who conquered the grave, the appearance of this thought is just the beginning of understanding the true scale of the victory. But to see the full picture, we must look at the logic of the reversal. We must examine how this victory in the depths translates into authority on the earth, because the keys he took are not just for the future, they are for right now, and the way he uses those keys will challenge everything you thought you knew about power and survival. We are about to enter the territory of the dialectic, where the darkness is forced to reveal the light it has been hiding. If we look at the silence of Saturday through the lens of a cosmic auditor, we begin to see that the greatest movements are often the ones that leave no trace on the surface. In the world of high finance and global markets, we are obsessed with the visible ticker, the green candles of Sunday and the red blood of Friday. But what if the true value of the soul was not settled in the public square of the cross, but in the private dark corridors of the descent? Think about the concept of a hostile takeover in the spiritual realm. The world thought the debt of humanity had led to a total liquidation of the Messiah's influence. The shareholders of darkness, the ancient rebels, and the principalities of this world believed they had finally foreclosed on the image of God. They saw a body in a tomb and calculated 100% loss. But in the dialectics of the divine, the silence of Saturday was not a bankruptcy. It was the ultimate audit of the underworld. When Jesus descended into the lower parts of the earth, he was not a victim of a market crash. He was the sovereign creditor entering the vault to reclaim what had been stolen by fraud and rebellion. In America today, we live in a culture that fears the silence of the Saturday. We are a nation of immediate returns and quarterly reports. If we do not see the resurrection by the next business day, we assume the investment has failed. We see this in the high-pressure streets of New York and the tech hubs of Silicon Valley. We equate stillness with stagnation. But the descent of Christ teaches us a different kind of economic philosophy. It is the philosophy of the hidden asset. While the disciples were hiding in a room, mourning what they perceived as the death of their dreams, Jesus was performing a cosmic merger and acquisition. He went to the spirits in prison, those ancient rebels from the days of Noah, who thought they had successfully corrupted the human lineage. These were the bad actors, the ones who had tried to manipulate the very fabric of creation to prevent this moment. Jesus did not go there to negotiate a settlement. He went there to announce that their liability had reached its limit. The Greek word for proclamation, kerusso, is the language of a herald, not a salesman. It is the declaration of a done deal. Imagine the shock in the deepest prisons of Tartarus when the one they thought was defeated walked through the gates as the ultimate judge. This is the inverse of how we view power in our modern world. We think power is about who can shout the loudest on social media or who can control the narrative in the news. But the true power of the descent was that it happened while the world was looking the other way. It was a victory won in the dark, in the quiet, and in the places that humanity had written off as lost. In our own lives, we often find ourselves in a Saturday season. It is that agonizing gap between the promise and the fulfillment. You have done the work. You have made the sacrifice, but the tomb is still sealed. The philosophy of the world tells you that if it is quiet, God is absent. The market of the soul tells you that if there is no movement, there is no value. But the descent proves that the most intense warfare happens when the physical body is at rest. Jesus was not waiting for Sunday to happen to him. He was creating Sunday from the inside out. He was dismantling the infrastructure of death while the Roman guards were sleeping. He was taking back the keys of the house while the enemy was celebrating a victory that did not exist, we must ask ourselves, what if our periods of waiting are actually our most productive seasons? What if the silence in your life right now is not a sign of abandonment, but a sign of a deeper work being done in the unseen realms? In the economy of heaven, faith is the currency that gains its greatest interest. During the times of silence, it is a compounding asset that grows when the world says the market is closed. The early church understood this. They did not rush to the celebration of the empty tomb without first honoring the weight of the descent. They knew that for the resurrection to be total, every corner of the universe had to be accounted for. Every debt had to be canceled. Every captive had to be given a choice. When we look at countries like the United States, where the Christian tradition is woven into the very foundation, we see a struggle with this Saturday reality. We want the glory of the rise without the depth of the descent. We want the prophet without the period of hiddenness. But the reverse analysis of the gospel shows us that the depth of your descent determines the height of your ascension. Jesus descended far below all things so that he might fill all things. This is the law of spiritual displacement. You cannot fill a vessel that has not been emptied. You cannot inhabit a realm that you have not first conquered. The descent was the ultimate due diligence. It was the proof that there is no place so dark, no prison so deep, and no rebellion so ancient that it is of the reach of the king, even in the depths of Sheol. In the realm of Abraham's bosom, the faithful were waiting for a payout that had been promised for thousands of years. They were the long-term investors in the promises of God. They died without seeing the fulfillment, yet they held their position, and when Jesus arrived, he did not just bring a message, he brought the dividend of eternity. He transformed their waiting room into a victory parade. This is the great reversal of the Saturday. What looked like a tomb for one man became a gateway for millions. What looked like the end of a movement was actually the expansion of a kingdom into the very roots of the earth. We often focus on the physical pain of the cross, and rightly so, but the mental and spiritual victory of the Saturday is where the legal rights of humanity were truly restored. It was there that the keys were seized. It was there that the spectacle was made of the defeated powers. As we navigate our own complex world of shifting values and economic uncertainty, we must anchor ourselves in the truth of the descent. We must learn to trust the silence. We must understand that the most important work of your life might be happening right now, in the places you cannot see, and in the moments when you feel most still. The silence is not empty. It is the sound of the foundations of the world being rearranged. It is the sound of the stone being prepared to move. But before we can fully grasp the magnitude of the light that broke on Sunday, we must first understand the logic of the darkness that was conquered on Saturday. We must look at how this cosmic victory translates into the very laws of cause and effect that govern our reality today. Because the victory Jesus won in the depths was not just for the dead. It was a blueprint for how we are to live in the land of the living. It was a demonstration of how a single act of obedience can trigger a chain reaction that spans across time and space. The descent was the catalyst for a new kind of existence, one where death is no longer a terminal debt, but a temporary transition. And as we move forward into the mechanics of this transformation, we will see that the light of the resurrection was not just a miracle, it was a legal necessity, born out of the victory in the shadows. The logic of the universe is not found in the noise of the crowd, but in the inevitable unfolding of established laws. When we look at the 3 days between the cross and the resurrection, we are not looking at a delay in the schedule. We are looking at the fulfillment of a cosmic contract. In the world of finance, we understand the concept of a settlement period. A transaction is initiated on one day, but it is not finalized until the clearinghouse confirms the assets have moved. This is the law of the third day. Jesus did not stay in the grave for 3 days because he was tired. He stayed there to satisfy the legal requirements of death. According to ancient Jewish custom, a person was not considered fully and legally dead until the 3rd day. Before that, there was a sliver of hope that the spirit might return. But by the 3rd day, the law of corruption took hold. The state of the asset was beyond recovery. By human means, this is why the timing of the descent is a masterclass in strategic positioning. If Jesus had risen on Saturday, the skeptics would have called it a swoon. They would have said the debt was not fully paid because the sacrifice was not fully consumed. But by waiting until the 3rd day, he forced the hand of reality. He waited until the market of hope had completely crashed. He waited until every disciple had liquidated their faith and gone into hiding. This is the principle of the absolute bottom. In economic cycles, the greatest wealth is generated by those who understand the value of the bottom. While the world saw a tomb, the Spirit of Christ saw a strategic entry point into the most depressed market in existence, the realm of the dead. This was not a rescue mission born of desperation, it was a hostile takeover of the kingdom of darkness. Think about the legal language used by the Apostle Paul. He speaks of disarming rulers and authorities. In a modern context, this is the stripping of assets. When a corporation goes bankrupt, the creditors come to take what is owed. Satan believed he was the primary creditor of humanity. He believed the debt of sin gave him a permanent lien on every human soul. He held the keys because he held the debt. But on that Friday, the spotless Lamb provided an overpayment of such magnitude that the debt was not just covered, it was erased. The descent was the process of serving the legal papers. Jesus entered the prison of the underworld, not to negotiate a settlement, but to declare a total discharge of debt for those who believed. This is the law of the harvest. You cannot have the fruit of Sunday without the burial of Friday and the germination of Saturday. In the United States, our entire legal and economic framework is built on the idea of the sanctity of contracts. We believe that if a price is paid, the goods must be delivered. The descent of Jesus is the ultimate proof that God honors his contracts. He promised Abraham a seed that would bless the nations. He promised David a kingdom that would have no end. If Jesus had stayed in heaven after the cross, those promises would have remained unfulfilled. The souls in Abraham's bosom were like investors who had put their capital into a long-term bond. They had the promise, but they had not yet seen the payout. When Jesus stepped into that realm, he was the dividend. He was the physical manifestation of the return on their investment of faith. This is the beauty of the divine economy. Nothing is wasted. Every tear shed by a prophet, every sacrifice offered by a priest, and every word spoken by a seer was being compounded through the centuries. And in those 3 days, the interest was paid in full. We often struggle with the silence of our own lives. We feel like we are in a Saturday season where the prayers are unheard and the accounts are empty, but we must understand the law of accumulation. Just because you do not see the movement on the surface does not mean the value is not growing. The most powerful forces in the universe operate in the dark. A seed grows in the dirt. A child grows in the womb. A legacy grows in the quiet moments of discipline. Jesus transformed the grave from a dead end into a staging ground. He showed us that the greatest victories require a period of invisibility. In the high-stakes world of global finance, the most significant moves are often made in the after-hours market. While the general public is asleep, the institutional players are repositioning their portfolios. The descent was the ultimate after-hours move, while the Roman guards slept and the religious leaders celebrated their perceived win. The King of Kings was reclaiming the infrastructure of eternity. He was taking back the keys. This is not just theology. It is the fundamental law of ownership. Whoever holds the keys controls the access. By descending into the lowest parts of the earth, Jesus proved that his jurisdiction has no boundaries. There is no dark corner of your life, no failed venture, and no broken relationship that is outside of his reach. He has been to the bottom, which means he can pull you up from anywhere. This is the consistency of the gospel. It is a system that works every time because it is based on the character of a God who cannot lie. The third day is a mathematical certainty in the kingdom of heaven. If you are currently in your second day, if you are in the middle of the struggle, you must hold on to the law of the sequence. The sun has never failed to rise, and the word of God has never failed to perform. To truly understand these deep patterns of the universe, we must be willing to look past the superficial and connect with the source of all wisdom. This connection is what allows us to navigate the volatile markets of life with a sense of peace that surpasses understanding. If you find value in this deep dive into the mechanics of faith and the philosophy of the unseen, I invite you to join our community. Subscribe to the Upside Down Life and engage with a collective of thinkers who refuse to settle for surface-level answers. By clicking that notification bell, you are not just following a channel, you are committing to a journey of intellectual and spiritual expansion. Let us continue to decode the mysteries together, for the truth is not a destination, but a path that we walk with open eyes and expectant hearts. Now, let us look closer at the nature of the proclamation Jesus made in the prison. The word used is caruso, which refers to a herald making an official announcement on behalf of a sovereign in the real world when a new law is passed. In Washington, or a new regulation is issued by a central bank, it is heralded to the public. The public does not vote on it at that point. The public simply receives the news of a new reality. When Jesus entered the realm of the spirits in prison, he was not there to ask for their opinion. He was there to announce the change in the cosmic order, the rebellion that began in the days of Noah. The attempt to corrupt the human bloodline and prevent the birth of the Messiah had officially failed. The spirits who had abandoned their proper dwelling were now faced with the very person they tried to stop. This is the ultimate irony of the divine strategy. The enemy often provides the very tools for his own destruction. By crucifying the Lord of glory, the powers of darkness open the door for him to enter their stronghold. They thought they were burying a man, but they were actually planting a revolution. This is the law of unintended consequences. In the world of economics, we see this when a government tries to suppress a market, only to create a booming underground economy that eventually takes over. The grave tried to suppress the life of God, but it only succeeded in giving that life a path to the underworld. Jesus used the grave as a bridge. He used death as a vehicle to reach the captives. This tells us something profound about the nature of obstacles. An obstacle is only a wall if you lack the power to go through it, if you have the authority of the Creator. An obstacle is simply a new territory to be conquered. The descent teaches us that there is no such thing as a lost cause. Even the spirits in the deepest prison, those who had been bound for millennia, had to hear the voice of the victor. This is the standard of total victory. A partial victory leaves the enemy with a base of operations. A total victory leaves the enemy with nothing but the memory of their defeat. When Jesus rose, he did not leave any loose ends. He led captivity captive. He took the very concept of being a prisoner and made it his own servant. Now, when we face captivity, whether it is the captivity of debt, addiction, or fear, we are dealing with a defeated foe. The chains have already been broken in the spirit. Our task is simply to walk in the reality of the proclamation. In the United States, we celebrate Independence Day to remember a declaration that was made long ago. The war had not yet been won when the declaration was signed, but the reality of independence was established. In the minds of the people, the descent of Jesus was the signing of the cosmic declaration of independence for all of humanity. The resurrection was the final battle that proved the declaration was true. We live in the tension of the already and the not yet. The victory is already won. but we are still walking out the implications in time and space. This is why we must study the laws of the kingdom. We must understand that our current circumstances are not the final word. The final word was spoken in the silence of Saturday. It was a word of triumph. It was a word of authority. It was the word that shook the foundations of the abyss. As we look at the transition from the depths of the earth back to the light of the morning, we see a pattern of restoration that applies to every area of our lives. Nothing that is lost in God is ever truly gone. It is simply being refined for a greater manifestation. The Jesus who went down is the same Jesus who came up, but he came up with more than he had when he went down. He came up with the keys. He came up with the captives. He came up with the name that is above every name. This is the law of spiritual profit. The investment of the life of Christ yielded a return of billions of souls. It is the most successful venture in the history of the universe. And as we move forward, we must learn to align our lives with this same rhythm of sacrifice, descent, and glorified return. The path to the throne always leads through the tomb, but the tomb is never the end of the journey. It is merely the gateway to the next level of authority and the beginning of a transformation that will eventually reach every corner of the created order. The silence of the tomb is not the absence of activity. It is the presence of a different kind of power. In the world of philosophy and the high stakes of global finance, we mistake stillness for stagnation. We look at the red numbers on a screen during a market crash, and we see a Friday. We see the death of an era. We see the end of a cycle. But the philosopher who has walked this earth for 50 years knows that Saturday is where the real work happens. The descent of Jesus into the heart of the earth is the ultimate blueprint for navigating the gaps in our own lives. It is the bridge between the pain of loss and the power of gain. In the heart of the American economy, we are often told to watch the news. We are told to follow the noise of the crowd, but the crowd only sees the cross and the empty tomb. They do not see the 3 days of warfare in the unseen realm. To truly understand the reality of our world, we must learn to read the silence. We must learn to distinguish between price action and intrinsic value. Price is the body in the tomb. It is visible, it is measurable, it can be cold and lifeless, but value is the spirit descending into the depths. Value is the work being done when no one is watching. When Jesus entered the realm of the dead, he was not looking at the price of his sacrifice. He was securing the value of every soul. He was reclaiming the keys in our modern financial landscape. The keys represent sovereignty. They represent the ability to move through the system without being a slave to the system. Most people live their lives in a state of perpetual Friday. They are constantly being crucified by debt, by inflation, and by the fear of the unknown. They wait for a Sunday that never seems to come because they do not know how to utilize their Saturday. Saturday is the season of accumulation. It is the time when the wise man descends into the data. He looks past the headlines of the mainstream media in New York or London. He looks into the depths of the ledger. He asks where the spirits are being held in prison. In economic terms, these prisons are the systems of centralized control that keep the average person in a cycle of poverty. The proclamation Jesus made in the depths was a declaration of freedom. He was telling the ancient rebels that their monopoly on human fear was over. When we apply this to our daily lives, we must realize that our greatest victories are often won in the quietest moments. It is the hours spent studying the laws of the universe. It is the discipline of saving when everyone else is spending. It is the courage to hold on to a vision when the world says it is dead. The 3-day pattern is a cosmic law of confirmation. In the markets, we see this as the rule of 3. 1 day of movement might be a fluke. 2 days might be a coincidence. But the 3rd day is the confirmation of a new reality. Jesus waited. Until the third day to prove that the death of the old system was absolute. He wanted there to be no doubt that the resurrection was not a resuscitation of the old, but the birth of the new. If you are currently in a season of silence, do not assume you are being forgotten. You are being prepared for a transition of power. The economic health of a nation is not measured by the height of its skyscrapers or the speed of its stock market. It is measured by the character of its people during the Saturday of their history. It is measured by how they handle the descent. Most people fear the descent because they associate it with failure, but for the one who follows the path of the King, the descent is a mission. It is a strategic move to take back what was stolen. Think about the keys that Jesus took, the keys of death and Hades. In our world, the keys are the tools of production. The keys are the access to clean water, fertile land, and honest money. For too long, these keys have been held by those who would use them to imprison the spirit of humanity. But the lesson of the 3 days is that no prison is permanent when the truth enters the room. When you look at your bank account or your business, do not just see the numbers, see the energy behind them. Are you building a tomb or are you preparing a gateway? The early church understood that the harrowing of hell was an invasion. They did not see Jesus as a victim of the Roman Empire or the elite. They saw him as a cosmic warrior who used the enemy's own trap to destroy the enemy's power. This is the ultimate form of reverse thinking. In finance, we call this being a contrarian when everyone is selling in a panic. The philosopher is buying with purpose when the world is screaming that the end is near. The seeker of truth is looking for the beginning. The silence of Saturday is the womb of greatness. It is where the seeds of the future are germinating in the dark. If you can master the silence, you can master the world. You must learn to ignore the superficial fluctuations of the news cycle. The news is designed to keep you in a state of Friday. It wants you focused on the thorns and the nails. It wants you to feel the weight of the stone. But the reality of the gospel is that the stone is already a formality. The victory was won the moment the Spirit of Christ stepped into the depths. The resurrection was just the public announcement of a private victory. In the same way, your financial breakthrough will not happen when the money hits your account. It happens the moment you decide to take back the keys of your own mind. It happens when you stop seeking permission from the guards at the gate. Jesus did not ask the spirits in prison if he could enter. He did not negotiate with the rulers of darkness. He proclaimed, he declared, he manifested his authority. This is how we must walk in the modern world. We must stop asking the broken systems of the earth to fix our problems. We must descend into our own inner temple and find the authority that has been given to us. The American dream was never meant to be a house with a white picket fence and a 30-year mortgage. It was meant to be the pursuit of liberty and the exercise of sovereignty. But liberty requires a Saturday mindset. It requires the willingness to stand in the gap between what is and what will be. It requires the patience to wait for the third day without losing heart. As we look at the shifting landscape of global power, we see many nations entering their own period of darkness. We see the shaking of the foundations. But for the one who understands the descent, this is not a time for fear. It is a time for positioning. It is a time to lead your own captivity captive. Take the things that used to scare you and make them your servants. Take the debt that used to weigh you down and use it as a lesson in discipline. Take the silence that used to feel like abandonment and use it as a sanctuary for growth. The world is waiting for the stone to roll away, but the real story is what is happening inside the cave. The real story is the light that is shining in the darkness. The real story is the King who is reclaiming his kingdom one soul at a time. Do not be distracted by the linen cloths. Do not be fooled by the stillness of the body. The Spirit is alive, the Spirit is moving, and the Spirit is calling you to join the procession. The triumph of Christ was a public spectacle in the spiritual realm. It was a parade of victory that shamed every power that thought it had won. When you finally step out of your Saturday, you will not just be surviving, you will be leading a train of captives. You will be bringing gifts to those around you. You will be a living testimony that the grave could not hold the truth. But before the light of Sunday breaks over the horizon, we must finish the work in the shadows. We must ensure that every corner of our lives has heard the proclamation. We must ensure that no part of our heart is still in prison. The descent is not over until the victory is complete. And the victory is not complete until every knee bows and every tongue confesses. In the realm of finance, this means that the truth of value will eventually overtake the illusion of price. The market can remain irrational for a long time, but it cannot remain irrational forever. The day of accounting is coming, the day when the books are opened and the true nature of our investments is revealed. Are you investing in the things that perish, or are you investing in the eternal? Are you building on the sand of Friday or the rock of the resurrection? The philosopher knows that the only lasting wealth is the wealth of the soul. The only true security is the security of the spirit. Everything else is just linen cloths in an empty tomb. So as we wait for the dawn, let us be busy in the dark. Let us be the ones who carry the light into the deepest prisons. Let us be the ones who whisper the name of the King to the broken-hearted. Let us be the ones who understand that the silence is not empty, it is holy ground. And on this holy ground, we are being transformed, we are being tempered, we are being made ready for the glory that is to come. The transition from the depths to the heights is the most powerful movement in the universe. It is the trajectory of the soul that has been redeemed. It is the path of the one who has seen the bottom and now sets his eyes on the throne. And as we prepare to see how this cosmic journey concludes, we must understand the weight of the keys that are now in our hands. For the authority of the King is not just for him to hold, but for us to exercise. In his name, the convergence of these 3 days represents the ultimate restructuring of the cosmic balance sheet. We have looked at the agony of the cross as the payment of an infinite debt. We have seen the descent into the depths as a hostile takeover of the kingdom of darkness. Now we must understand how these events fuse into a singular reality for our lives today. In the world of finance, we often speak of a total liquidation. This is when every asset is accounted for and every liability is settled. What Jesus did between Friday and Sunday was the total liquidation of the power of death. He did not just pay the interest on our moral debt. He wiped out the principal entirely. He entered the vault of the enemy and seized the keys to the entire operation. This is the convergence point where theology meets the reality of our daily existence. Many people live their lives in a state of constant inflation. They inflate their egos, their desires, and their fears. But the silence of Saturday teaches us the value of deflation. It is the stripping away of everything that is not eternal. It is the moment when the market of human effort closes and the sovereign work of God takes over. When we look at the descent of Christ, we are looking at the ultimate due diligence. He went into the lowest parts of the earth to ensure that no corner of creation was left unredeemed. In our modern economy, we fear the bottom. We fear the moment when the charts stop moving and the screen goes dark. But for the believer, the bottom is where the foundation is laid. Jesus went to the bottom of the universe to prove that there is no depth his grace cannot reach. This is the philosophy of the upside-down life. In a world that demands immediate returns, the 3 days teach us about the power of compounding silence. The silence of the grave was not a lack of activity. It was accumulation of power that would eventually shatter the stone. If you are currently in a season of waiting, do not mistake it for a lack of progress. Your Saturday is an investment in a Sunday that will never end. The early church understood this better than we do. They did not see the world as a series of random accidents. They saw it as a managed portfolio under the authority of the risen King. They knew that even when the price of faith seemed high, the long-term value was guaranteed. The descent was the proof that Jesus had conquered the volatility of the human condition. He entered the realm of the dead to stabilize the realm of the living. He took the volatility of sin and replaced it with the fixed income of righteousness. This is the ultimate wealth. It is not a wealth measured in paper or gold. It is a wealth measured in the freedom of a soul that no longer fears the end. The convergence of the cross, the descent, and the resurrection is the blueprint for sustainable prosperity. It begins with the sacrifice of the self. It continues through the quiet work of the Spirit in the dark, and it culminates in a life that cannot be held by the grave. We must move beyond the surface level of modern religious noise. We must stop chasing the temporary spikes of emotional excitement. Instead, we must look for the deep underlying value of what was accomplished in the shadows. The harrowing of hell was the moment the monopoly of death was broken. The keys Jesus took back are the instruments of our liberation. They allow us to unlock the doors of our own prisons. They give us the authority to walk out of our own tombs of regret and shame in the economy of God. Nothing is wasted. The tears of Friday are the seeds of Sunday. The silence of Saturday is the breath before the shout. Every moment of your life is being integrated into this grand design. The philosopher knows that time is not just a linear progression. It is a cycle of death and rebirth governed by a higher law. When you align your life with the work Jesus did in those 3 days, you are aligning yourself with the most powerful force in the universe. You are moving from a mindset of scarcity to a mindset of infinite abundance. You are no longer a victim of the market of life. You are an heir to a kingdom that cannot be shaken. As we reflect on these mysteries, we realize that the greatest battle was indeed won in the silence. The noise of the world often drowns out the most important truths, but those who listen to the silence of the tomb will hear the heartbeat of God. They will find a peace that transcends any economic crisis or personal tragedy. They will see that the stone has already been rolled away, not just from his grave, but from their own hearts. This is the message of the upside-down life. It is the realization that the way up is down, the way to live is to die, the way to gain is to give, and the way to find ultimate victory is to surrender to the one who has already conquered it all. The descent of Jesus is the final piece of the puzzle, and it ensures that you are never, ever alone. Whatever you are facing today, remember the 3 days. Remember that the story does not end in the dark. The dark is simply the womb of the light. The grave is simply the gateway to the throne. Live with the confidence of one who knows the final outcome. Live as a person of the resurrection. Even while you walk through the shadows of the descent, your life is a precious asset. In the hands of the Master Creator, He is refining you, preparing you, and positioning you for a glory that outweighs all your current troubles. Trust the process. Trust the silence. Trust the King who holds the upside-down wealth. Jesus' strategic move in the spirit realm. The keys. If this journey through the hidden depths of Scripture has changed your perspective, I invite you to join our community at the Upside Down Life. We do not just look at the surface, we dive deep into the mysteries that define our existence. We seek to understand the spiritual laws that govern our world and our wealth. If you want to continue exploring these profound truths and build a faith that is unshakable, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell so you never miss a moment of these deep dives into the Word of God. Share this message with someone who is currently walking through their own Saturday. Let them know that the silence is not empty. Let them know that victory is already in motion. Together, we will uncover the treasures hidden in the darkness. We will walk in the authority of the one who descended and ascended far above all things. Thank you for standing on this holy ground with me today. The tomb is empty, but the revelation is full. Go forth in peace, knowing that the battle is finished and the triumph is yours. Subscribe to the Upside Down Life and let us walk this path of awakening together.